I had no idea when I started this exercise in preparing for this webinar how important she has been, and how neglected she has been. She's been ignored by the mainstream churches for her extraordinary work that she has done. And it's very interesting, and you'll probably understand why I've chosen her as an embodiment of the International Women's Day for 2025. Now, before I continue talking about Hildegard of Bingen, I do want to also remind everyone about the Aromatherapy Academy. And first of all, I'd like to thank you all, those of you that have subscribed already. And I do hope that you're enjoying the platform. We put a lot of wonderful information on the platform. I will be getting back, once I come back from an event next month, I'll be getting back to those monthly discussions, group chats that we have as well. But of course, we'll be doing many more fascinating webinars. I have, for this particular webinar, put together a lot of extra information. I've got links to a lot of the references. I've got links to some of the music and to a movie about Hildegard of Bingen, and there is a very comprehensive set of notes. I got carried away basically, because the more I read about her, the more excited I got. And mind you, there is so much information out there about her, from academics who have done their PhDs to lay people, to healers and doctors that have all somehow incorporated her philosophy and her work into their work. And I will be looking forward to sharing with you some of these incredible insights. There was some conflicting information as well that I did discover, and I will articulate some of these conflicts throughout the presentation. Now, by joining the Aromatherapy Academy, and we have two options to join the Aromatherapy Academy, a monthly fee or an annual fee, you can get access to all this information. Look, next month, and I think it's not booked out yet, but next month I will be doing a one-day workshop, the Natural Perfumery Workshop. And if you're an Aromatherapy member, it's for free. But the normal fee to do that one-day workshop, because you get to make a blend and everything, and you'll get some notes, it's $95. So straight away, there's a good saving there. Next month's webinar, by the way, is going to be on therapeutic clinical blending. These webinars go for about 1 hour, but there's a lot of information packed in them. And sometimes there's more than 1 hour's worth of information. So we put it together as notes that you can then access on the Aromatherapy platform. So each month we do look at some very interesting topics. The most important, coming up very soon, it's in May. I can't wait for this. I'm going to call it the Aromatherapy event of the year. It's the launch of the Cultural Dharma of Scent, my book, where I have chosen 28 beautiful words, and the Cultural Dharma very much refers, and I am sure Hildegard of Bingen would have loved this word very much. She actually had a word that I'll talk about, which is very similar. It's the power, it's the spirit of the word. Each word has its own unique power. It embodies certain qualities, certain spiritual qualities, very much aligned with Hildegard of Bingen in this respect. But what I have done is I've gone one step further, not only explain the word in traditional Japanese context, but what it can mean to us as individuals living in Western culture. I've then also matched it to an essential oil. I was very blessed and honored that some of the priests in Koyasan in Japan were more than excited to do the calligraphy for the book. They've done calligraphy itself is like art. In a way, this is very much like a miniature version of the Skivus, one of Hildegard's books, because it incorporates the art, it incorporates visuals, it incorporates smell as well. Look, I'm very looking forward to the launch. The launch is going to be on Sunday the 18th. It's 2 hours, and the cost to attend the launch is the cost of the book. But I will have 2 very special guests coming to that event, or 3 very special guests. My business partner and translator, who is actually working now on the Japanese translation. She will be translating for one of the priests from Koyasan, who will be speaking about his spiritual connection with the term Kotodama, and he'll be talking about some of his favorite words from the book, and his wife, who is a tea ceremony master. I was very honored and privileged to be able to attend one of her tea ceremonies, and it's spectacular. One of the words in the book, Wakai Seijaku, actually refers to a specially crafted moment, and this specially crafted moment is a very particular reference to the tea ceremony. It's going to be an absolutely incredible day, so please mark Sunday the 18th of May in your diary. Now, if you're in Australia and you cannot attend the event in Brisbane, we will be having a smaller event in Sydney and in Melbourne as well. And of course, if you are overseas or somewhere outside of those 3 major capital cities, we will be actually live streaming the event, so you can join the event that way as well. So I look forward to your participation in that. Now, back to this incredible person, Hildegard, and why I decided to choose her, first of all, as the embodiment of this year, the role model for the International Women's Day, which, by the way, was on Saturday, but we were all anxiously waiting on Saturday as the Cyclone Alfred hit and the floodwaters started to rise. So I wanted to do a little presentation on that day, but we were all too anxious at home on that day. Now, I have broken the presentation up into like 7 lessons. It's going to get a bit informal, but there is structure and there are notes accompanying each of these lessons. Garrett, who always helps me, is going to have a nightmare trying to separate the video into each lesson. So I'm going to ask him, because if you're on the Aromatherapy Academy, you can watch this at your own time. So it'll just be available as one video, because I don't know if we'll be able to get through everything in here, but I do want to touch on all these various topics. Initially, I was just going to talk about her role and her inspiration as a healer, because she's still talked about, and when you go to study herbal medicine, she's still spoken about from a historical context, because she actually put together some incredible materia medicas. But then the more I looked into it, I said, oh my God, this person is absolutely amazing. And she is definitely what we would refer to as the role model for the 2025 International Women's Day, which basically the theme for this year is accelerating action. And when we look at what she was able to achieve and what she did, I hope that you will all find that inspiration to help accelerate the action. I think we are just, I would hope that we have made so much progress in the 21st century, but in some ways I think our culture's become so regressive again, and we need her hope and inspiration more than ever. So you might be asking, well, why on earth would we look at somebody who lived in the Middle Ages as a role model for the 21st century? So I suppose let's have a look at how people describe her. And I think, and you've got to remember that in this period, in the 12th century, women were not able to participate in all the things that Hildegard did. How did she get away with it? Okay, so for example, one of her biographies, one on Carmen Aveda Butcher, she says, who was she? She said, would you expect anything less from an abbess, an artist, and a cosmologist, a composer, a counsellor, a dietitian, a dramatist, healer, linguist, mystic, naturalist, philosopher, poet, a politician? Maybe she's going a bit too far, saying she's a politician, but I know what she's suggesting, and I will come back to that one. She was a consultant, definitely. She was a preacher, she was a prophet, and perhaps if Hildegard wanted to be remembered as anything it was as a prophet, she was a visionary. She wrote theological, she wrote naturalistic, botanical, medical, and dietary texts. She emphasized the importance of diet for health and well-being. And she did let loose with her pen, writing lots of letters. And the great thing is, a lot of this has actually been preserved. How is it that a woman in particular from the 12th century could be all these things? So in this sense, she was a person whom all people had absolute respect for in terms of what she did. Now, so the theme behind International Women's Day is, as I've said, accelerate action. First of all, it's about celebrating the progress that has been made in the 30 years since it was actually started. And this basically was a commitment to gender equality. And accelerate action is also about acknowledging the advances made, but also acknowledging that there's still a lot to do. It is very much a call to action to accelerate the progress of gender equality. We cannot afford to slow down, and we need actively to push for change. Now, Hildegard really embodied this and was very much an activist, rallying. Hers was a call to action for change within the hierarchy of society in the 12th century, and very much focused on the future. And it's about empowering the next generation, particularly young women and girls, and to be leaders to fight for equality. I've come across some very wonderful, and I think I would rather use some of the comments by some of the authors that are very well respected on the topic of Hildegard of Bingen. And Matthew Fox, a big fan of Hildegard, he says, she challenged women to be their full selves, to influence culture as well as home life, to express experience and not hold it back. Now that's interesting, because for a while she did hold back her experiences. And what is pivotal to understanding Hildegard is the visions that she had. And these visions were very powerful. And for a long time she held them back, because to have expressed these visions could have been considered heresy. She could have been seen as a witch if they were taken the wrong way by the church. She also was very much a champion of a holistic culture, Fox says, where women and men alike share their wisdom mutually. And very much, he goes on to say, Hildegard is a spokesperson for the silent millions. She hints at what has been missed in a one-sided patriarchal culture, church, and even embedded within the psyche. So I think he articulates very clearly the important role that Hildegard played in advancing women's voices to be heard. Now, we always have to remember that we have to take things in the context of the time in which she lived. And she lived in the Middle Ages. And this was very much a time which women were not allowed to have an education, and for the only way for them to have an education was to join a monastery. That was the only way. Her parents, we don't know the real reason, and when you read the different biographies, we do know that she was 8 years old, mind you, when her parents put her into a monastery. Now, one of the first things she did when she was old and when she became an abbess, said, no, we can no longer accept children at the age of 8. And I think she raised the bar a little to, I think, about 14. So that alone says something. But not only was she asked to enter a monastery, she was asked, but she had, so it wasn't completely, if you remember Julian of Norwich, for example, and I did an incredible, I did a beautiful presentation on Julian of Norwich several years ago in the midst of the pandemic, because she lived during that period. But she was actually confined to quarters, which basically was silent, but she did have a mentor. But very soon, between her mentor Jutta and Hildegard, there was this interest, and more women wanted to join this closeted group, who became quite influential in their own right. And I'll talk about that in terms of the history. But yeah, so we've got to put things into that context. So can we rewrite the history or reinterpret the history? I think we can reinterpret what went on in the 12th century so that it is relevant to what is happening now in the 21st century. But Matthew Fox also says, and I want to read one of the, no, I'll get so excited, I'm going to read this letter now. Hildegard was not only a mystic, she was a prophet, and she sees herself and her work consciously and deliberately as prophetic. Now, the reasons that she did this is she had these visions, and these visions that she experienced were directly from God, she says. Hildegard very much believed that there was this deep connection between the spiritual and physical well-being. And she actually mapped this onto the human spine. And she came up with 35 vices and virtues. She said the spine is like a microcosm, and through each of the vertebrae corresponds to a specific virtue and its opposing vice. Now, the full list can be found in my notes if you're an Aromatherapy member, and it's quite fascinating, but I will highlight some of them here. And she then believes also that the imbalances of a person's spiritual or emotional life is represented by the vice, and it could also manifest as a physical ailment to the corresponding area governed by that vertebra. Now, we now know, and I was taught this when I did my aromatherapy massage, about the dermatones, the connection between each of the vertebra and the dermatones, and how that relates to certain organs in the body. So this is some of the work that she had done back then. Find that very fascinating. So I'll come to my punchline at the end. Was Hildegard an aromatherapist? Probably not in the true sense of what we would call aromatherapist today, but was she very much aware in terms of the holistic approach to healing? Very much so. So she did lay very much the foundations for all holistic medicine. So she very much said also that the virtues are essential for restoring balance and promoting healing. For those of you that attended my first presentation on the VIE, the Institute of the Strengths, Character Strengths, what I've done is I've made a connection between those character strengths and Hildegard's vices and virtues. So, but unlike the character strengths basically focus on the virtues, but there is always the shadow side of each of the virtues or character strengths. And Hildegard spoke of these because she said it's these vices that are the catalyst for illness and for disease and disharmony of the soul. And so she said practices such as meditation and prayer are important to help us reconnect with the virtues. So as I've said here, connecting with these, there is a very strong connection with the vices and virtues in contemporary relationship with contemporary mental health. So the vices are the negative patterns. Vices like anger, envy, greed can be seen as negative thought patterns and emotional tendencies that will lead to mental distress. Chronic anger will lead to anxiety and depression. Envy can lead to feelings of insecurity and inadequacy, for example. On the other hand, virtues are the positive coping mechanisms. Virtues like patience, compassion, humility, they are all the positive coping mechanisms that help to promote emotional resilience. Cultivating compassion, for example, can help reduce the feelings of isolation and loneliness, and while practicing patience can also help to manage stress and anxiety. So all this has become like a foundation, I believe, for it that has modern applications. CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy that I spoke about earlier, shares a lot of similarities between Hildegard's approach on focusing and identifying and changing those negative thought patterns. Mindfulness practices very much align with Hildegard's emphasis on focusing on cultivating inner peace and balance. So by examining the vices that can affect us and cultivating the opposite, the virtues, we can improve our mental health. She identified 35 of them. So I just want to summarize now some of the relationship I see with the VIA framework that I spoke about in the first webinar. And by the way, I do have to finish those some of those presentations. Garrett's looking at me. I will do that very soon. Okay, Hildegard's compassion, for example, very much aligns with the VIA strength of love, kindness, and social intelligence. Hildegard's chastity aligns with the strength of temperance and self-regulation. Courage aligns with the VIA strength of bravery and perseverance. Humility directly aligns with humility, which is one of the strengths. Charity strongly correlates with the strength of kindness and generosity, whereas justice relates to fairness. Stability, she uses the term stability, relates to the strength of prudence and self-regulation. So it's quite fascinating how we can make that connection to contemporary psychotherapy. So indeed, was Hildegard a psychotherapist? In her time, yes, she was. I still wonder, do you have any thoughts? I seriously, this is a question I want to put to you, and please share with everyone. If Hildegard was born in the 20th century and was living today, what would she be doing? I always wonder this. Would she be a politician? Would she be a healer? I'd like your thoughts on this. It's incredible. Now, I do want to go on now and just talk a little bit about her manuscripts, her works, the books that she wrote. These were all what we call illuminated, illustrated. Once again, some of the illustrations you'll see, they're all from her work. And it's wonderful that a lot of this has been preserved, except for the original, and I'll tell you about that one very soon. But there are three of her main, and they form the body of her work in terms of her spiritual work. Scivis was the first one. Knowing the way of the Lord. Another way to think of it is I read somebody write the Tao. It could be written, translated as the Tao. The next one is the Book of Life Merits. So this is another manuscript that she wrote. And here is where she talks about the vices and the virtues. Then there is the Liber Divorium Operum, which is the Book of Divine Works. And this is where she puts all her knowledge from the first two works together. So she gives us a framework on how we can live a better life. The illuminations, they're quite stunning and quite beautiful. They make use of vivid colours, beautiful symbolic imagery, and female figures. They feature quite prominently because she really embraced the feminine divine, and these were very central to Hildegard's theology. Here's another beautiful work, The Cycle of the Season, The Days of Creation. Now, I think this is a replica, but this would have been done about 100 years after, because the original, which had been kept, it was bound together. So soon after her death, all her three works were put together. Now, this one, I don't know where it can be found, but the original manuscript was kept in Rome, and then later it was sent back to Germany. But during the war, the Skivus was then transferred to safekeeping in Dresden. Yeah, we know about that, don't we? But it survived. Apparently it survived the fire bombings of the Dresden. But then it was lost. At the end of the war in 1945, Dresden came under the occupation of the Soviet troops. And unfortunately, around that time, we're not pointing the finger at anybody, are we? The original Skivus manuscript disappeared. But there are copies that had been made after her death. So this, I think, is one of the copies that is available. Now, I just had to mention this because music was fundamental to Hildegard. Music was a way of being one with the universe, being one with God. She felt that. Now, this is how pathetic the men in power were at the time. I have to tell you this story. The year before she died, she was like, she was 80. Hildegard and her sisters at Rupertsberg were interdicted by the choir bishop of Mainz. That basically means that there was like a formal punishment given to them. And it started like this. The controversy centered around Hildegard and her community's decision to bury in their cemetery a person who was referred to as a revolutionary youth who had been excommunicated by the archbishop. Now, basically, Hildegard, when this youth came to her, basically had condemned, Hildegard. So when this person died, he was buried in her cemetery in her convent. But the bishop said, hold on, he's been excommunicated, so you need to dig out the body. The body cannot remain in the cemetery. Hildegard refused to dig up the body and to eject it from her convent grounds. And when the bishop requested, he basically said, no, you're not allowed to sing anymore to praise God. Really? How pathetic was that? Now, because she had basically said, look, this person, before they died, they had confessed, they were anointed, and they had been communicated before they died. And so this person had every right to be buried here. She removed any relevance to where he was buried so that they could not unbury him, dig him out. So that's how strong she was, head fast. She said, no, this person can stay here. So she, then she wrote to the bishop and said, basically, those who choose, and of course she used very polite language, but very forthright language, those who choose to silence music in this lifetime will go to a place where they will be without the company of angelic songs of praise in heaven. She wrote to that bishop saying that. Soon after, the interdiction was lifted. And soon after that, she passed away. So to the very end of her life, she was fighting these pathetic men, this patriarchal society. Now, I'm looking at the time, and I do still have a few slides that I want to go through. I just want to show you, the bishop said, you cannot praise God. You cannot sing in the church anymore. You must do it in silence for a short time. This is the type of music that she wrote. I will just play a very small section of this, and I hope you can hear it, but this clip is available on YouTube, and I prefer watching the live performances. They just add so much more feeling and depth, rather than you'll see a lot of the recordings there, but the live recordings are amazing.
Yeah.
What's Hildegard in finishing off an aromatherapist? Now, this comes from one of her biographies. And so let me read this to you. The likelihood is that as a young woman, she would have served the form of apprenticeship in the infirmary at the Duisenberg monastery, helping to treat not only the sick, but also the deaf, the blind, the lame, the old, and the infirm for a wide common range of treatments. The nuns would have also been quite accustomed to acting as the midwives to the local women, and even in the absence of the priest, hearing their confessions before labour, because there was always a high risk of mortality or baptised babies in case of stillbirth, or baptising babies in case. Now, one of the remedies that she suggested, that she speaks about, is the oil of thyme, lily or musk rubbed on the midwife's hands and used to ease the turning of the baby in the womb or enlarging of the mother's cervix. So here's a very clear example of her using aromatic remedies, which probably would have eased the childbirth. The scent of lily, the scent of oil of thyme, perhaps for its analgesic properties. She also, in the book Physica, refers to camphor. She talks about them energetically. So those of you that are more familiar with the energetics of the essential oils will strongly relate with this. Camphor, namely its gum. Now, she wouldn't have necessarily been talking about the essential oil, so here we are talking about the plant. Has a pure coldness in it, but the tree which exudes the camphor has a sharp, clean coldness. Perfect way to describe camphor. If you are strong and healthy, you will be remarkably stronger and more healthy, and your powers will become well constituted. If you are sick, it lifts you up and strengthens you in a wonderful way as the sunlight lights a stormy day. That's what it feels like today. We've had the first day of sunshine after 5 horrendous days of Cyclone Alfred. But it's beautiful. Her descriptions are quite poetic. So this is like a direct translation out of the book Physica. Cinnamon she describes as very hot, and its power is great. Its heat is so strong that it will suppress dampness. It diminishes bad humours. So bad humours were associated with excess damp. And one who eats it often, talking now about the digestive, provides him with good humours. Lavender spike, hot and dry. Very perfect description, because it has a lot of the camphor as the constituent in spike lavender. Its heat is healthy. Whoever cooks with this lavender in wine and frequently drinks it. So yes, she didn't mind having a little drink of wine, because wine was actually used predominantly as the base for a lot of the herbal decoctions that she would have made. It will lessen the pain of the liver and the lungs. Quite interesting. So now talking about the lavender's potential hepatic properties, perhaps, and the stuffiness in the chest. It makes his thinking and disposition pure, so it clears the head as well. So on the other hand, I love the way that she describes normal lavender is hot and dry, having very little moisture, but it curbs very many evil things, and because of it, malign spirits are terrified. Think of that next time you smell lavender and you're thinking of something terrifying. That lavender, the malign spirits are terrified of the smell of lavender. Talks about nutmeg, and I'm wondering here if she's referring to nutmeg's psychotropic properties. It will open his heart and make his judgment free from obstruction and give him a good disposition. Interesting. Pepper is very hot and dry, not surprisingly. So she suggests that pepper should be used with your food and with your bread, and that the person's spleen will be better and their digestion as a result will be better. So she talks quite extensively about these plants in the same way that we as aromatherapists today talk about these oils. Fennel, mild heat, neither dry nor cold nature. Whenever it is consumed, it makes a person happy. It brings a gentle heat, good perspiration, and makes the digestion good. That's the first thing I think of with fennel. So eating fennel diminishes bad phlegm and decaying matter and keeps the bad breath in check. So compared to all her other work that came from the visions, these works were very practical, focusing very much. These books were very practical, focusing very much on practical advice for improving our health and well-being. So I just wanted to pretty much finish off very much in saying, going back to why I started this project on into Hildegard of Bingen, saying she was a reformer and we need women who are reformers now. And that's why I chose her as the person that embodies the qualities of International Women's Day for 2025. But I think it's a timeless embodiment as far as I'm concerned. As we now know, she was a fearless critic who spoke the truth to the authorities. She advocated for reform, moral and spiritual renewal within the church. She challenged the status quo of women's role in the church. When she was told to stay at home, she went out preaching from town to town. She was an advocate for justice. She protected her communities. She promoted spiritual renewal, and of course she championed women's role. So very much she had this deep love of her community, of society, and of course of the church, and she wanted to ensure that it was available for all, not just for men. So this is another, if you like, on the budget in terms of getting hold of a book, there's a couple of good books. I think The Spirit of the Saint of Hildegard by Barbara Levin Fisher. This is a gorgeous book. It's a very simple book. It's very much almost like a coffee table book. It will give you a very light introduction, but she's got some beautiful advice that I can see she's extracted it from all of Hildegard's work so that we can understand what it means today. And I think, yeah, each one of these gets a big tick from me. Love God, love your neighbour, love yourself. First bit of advice. Be thankful for all things. Use discretion in all things. Sing a little every day. I don't know if we'll ever be able to sing the same way that Hildegard intended to sing in terms of the music that she wrote, but sing a little every day. Dance a little every day. Pray a little every day. Don't ever give up. Be of good courage. Discover your strengths and natural talents and use them. Take the road less travelled. Find a way to be of service. Give more than you take. Be compassionate to all. Reinvent yourself. She obviously constantly was doing new things, challenging herself, right up to the day that she died. So don't let go of your childlike wonder and imagination. Don't let your childlike wonder and imagination go into retirement. I love that. Always do your best. Above all, develop your two spiritual wings. I think these are very powerful, awe and love. So in conclusion, I think Hildegard's work and her life demonstrates the power of women to lead, create and inspire change. She marched forward with courage, vision and determination, and she left this incredible mark on history. Her legacy is going to be a powerful reminder that women have always been at the forefront of progress, challenged the norms and shaped the world we live in. So let us celebrate Hildegard of Bingen on this International Women's Day 2025, and we honour her contributions and reaffirm our commitment to marching forward towards a more just and equitable world for all of us, as Hildegard would have wanted us to do. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to do this presentation. Thank you.